Hello, everyone. This is Professor Hamamoto, and it is October 20th. Yes, my gosh, we're reaching the end of the month. It's almost that national holiday of all the Luciferians and Satanists that are running the United States of America. It's 3 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Welcome, everyone. Today, I have a special treat for you. I was just kind of revisiting this incredible piece of scholarship here. It's by a gentleman who teaches at the University of New Mexico, by the way. We're gonna be talking a lot about New Mexico today. His name's David King Dunaway, and I'm going to look into getting him on the show here. Anyway, he did an incredible biography about Huxley during his American period, right? Don't get excited, right? You hear the name Aldous Huxley, and it all comes rushing back. Oh yeah, the Wedgwoods and T.H. Huxley and the whole litany that we've been hearing for over and over. So be patient because I have a lot of original material that's going to take that discussion much further and much deeper than we've seen, largely because of the repetition and the recycling and frankly plagiarism. Right, that term has gone out of the language. Like any type of googling or youtubing is called research these days. Okay, I'm not going to rant. I'm not going to do that. But this guy's a bona fide scholar, for whatever that's worth. And people like Huxley, as I mentioned before, the authors of two generations ago, they were learned men and women. They understood literature going back, you know, to biblical literature, right? Going back 1,000 years and into classical antiquity and so on. And this was the norm for even the popular writers of the day. And by the day, I'm talking about late Victorian, Edwardian period. And I mentioned in specific author Conan Doyle, right? Who, as we discussed last time, had a keen interest and I would say even expertise in matters of the occult in the Anglo-American, that means U.S. and Britain world. But you may not have really fully realized because you're locked into the um, Alex Jones framework, the cartoon version of who Aldous Huxley and the Huxleys were, T.H. Huxley and Julian Huxley. Oh yeah, UNESCO, right? It's like a knee-jerk reaction to that. But you may not know that Aldous Huxley, despite all his pretensions to science and scientism and rationality, he had a very strong interest in the occult. And he went so far as to visit the American Southwest and eventually wound up in California for a short time. Well, for a number of years, it's not really a short time. He was able to really absorb what was going on. And today, when I was revisiting this book, I came across the insight, and I have to confirm it. But I think I'm on the right track. He was also on an intelligent. I'm talking about Huxley and his wife, Maria. Right? They were on an intelligence mission. He was an MI5. All right. I don't even think that term was out there. I think that was something that they put out there much later. But as you know, British intelligence goes back at least as far as Queen Elizabeth I, right? You know the story, John D. 007, James Bond, blah, 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 right? So it's within the tradition of the British intellectual, the educated courtier and literary person, man and woman, including Virginia Woolf and I don't know if they had a direct connection with the intelligence agencies, but certainly the literary people, the poets, the musicians, the artists, the creative people, in other words, have that connection because unlike maybe in the United States at the higher level, today we just kind of look at artists as being people on iTunes or Spotify. That's what we or videos, right? If those even remain. We look at someone like Kanye West as primarily just being in that little box of entertainer. And yeah, I know his name's Ye these days. And Supposedly, he's going to be buying Parler, the right-wing platform. So that's going to be really interesting. PSYOP, I don't know. Feint maneuver, I don't know. But Huxley was real. He's been gone from the scene a long time, and there's a body of work that he left behind, and also a lot of scholarship that talks about this duality. He was coming from this family of eminent scientists and philosophers and social reformers. Huxley himself was against British entry into World War One. He was against, well, he kind of backed off on it, but World War Two, he's a pacifist. All right, I'm not saying that. That's what he describes himself. So is Bertrand Russell. And I say this because these thinkers, British or American, again, and German, like the cultural Marxists, right? Oh, Herbert Marcuse, Theodor Adorno. They're stereotyped. They're cartooned by people supposedly on our side unfairly. And I'm not just talking about unfairly, unrealistically. And I'm also the larger point is that these individuals who are put in a cartoon form by people who really don't know anything about the intellectual history or even the literary cultural background of it. They're shortchanging the people who are the repeaters and who are replicating all this impartial, this at best partial knowledge. I wouldn't even call it knowledge. It's just sort of gossip and rumor that it's ideal for social media, YouTube and Twitter and all the other, you know, minor. And as much as I complain about YouTube, I drew liberally from YouTube in bringing you some really good information that'll give us visual and oral um, reinforcement of the arguments that I'm going to be making here today. First of all, so that's a unique thesis I'm arguing, and if anybody else beat me to it, that's fine. I will acknowledge and defer to your prescience. But so far as I know, I'm the only one that's made the explicit connection, and it's a hypothesis at this point. I can't even call it a theory; it's a conjecture. How's that? That there is a close connection between why these expats, these British wealthy people, the elites, the intelligentsia, and the artists, as in combination with the American elites of the East Coast, migrated to places like Taos, New Mexico, later Santa Fe. And of course, it's no coincidence that a hop, skip, and a jump away, you've got places like Alamogordo, the birthplace of the not the birthplace. That's where they did the experimentation for the atomic weapons. That's not a coincidence. And who was there even before the Manhattan Project touched down? Decades before, I think about 30 years, as early as teens, right before World War One, around World War One, because there are a lot of German espionage going on U.S. Mexico border, and New Mexico is a border state. And as you know, as I said earlier, uh, Mexico, Estados Unidos de Mexico, or Mexico, was once a Hanoverian outpost. They had their own king there, right? The Habsburg people, and of course, the last Habsburg king of Mexico was executed along with his queen, right? That's what happens to oligarchs. It might have happened in 2022 or 2020, you know, as we'll see that there's repeating cycles of history, and the Hopi people understood the Zuni, which we'll be talking about it. But the linear-minded, one-dimensional, or at best three-dimensional, this is before quantum entanglement, physicists, right, of the T.H. Huxley ilk, these evolutionists, right, steady progression. Of course, British Empire is always going to be on the top, right? And British anthropology, by the way, was the science by which the supposed native people were being studied, right? And British anthropology grew hand in hand with British imperialism, British colonialism, and its intelligence again. But they always had close contact with the explorers, right? Mr. Watson and Burroughs Wellcome, the Wellcome Trust Foundation. They were all up in the African continent. They had their traveling pharmaceutical salesmen gathering information and developing markets. Well, the same thing with the artists here. And I'm just telling you again because I think this supports my hypothesis that people like Huxley and before him, and this is a name that you might not hear, and that's why I warn against you getting excited and start rapping off in the comments your whole litany of what you think you know about Aldous Huxley and Julian Huxley and UNESCO and blah, 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 New World Order. But a name that you don't know is D.H. Lawrence. And it so happens that I became a D.H. Lawrence freak when I was in college because the first wave women, they were called women's liberation back then, right? Against our will. I mean, I read, and she was an intellectual. And as you know, she was an asset herself. Gloria Steinem was sort of the popular version of the first wave, what are called first wave feminists now. And they attacked D.H. Lawrence for being sexist and blah, blah, blah. And of course, he's attacked today for being racist because he lived amongst the native people and romanticized them. Or, that's one argument. I don't think so because I'm getting ahead of myself. But D.H. Lawrence was expelled, not strictly expelled. He was made to feel unwelcome from the land of his birth, which was Britain. And he was from the Midlands, the coal mining regions. And he had a front row seat to watching the not the transformation, but showing some of the insidious effects of industrialization, probably reaching its high point moving into World War II. And of course, you know what happened in the 60s, 70s, miners' strikes, rampant unemployment. We're talking about today, right? Lawrence was already seeing this, and then, of course, that by the time he came along, the so-called Industrial Revolution in Britain had already peaked out, right? So he was looking for a more pristine society and civilization that had preceded that in his own home country, and he saw that in the Celts. He saw that in the Druids, and he's a writer. He's a poet. He wrote poetry, but mostly he's known for his novels, his fictions, where some people said they were salacious, like women in love. Oh no, Lady Chatterley's Lover was banned from the U.S. And of course, by the time I came along, it had court cases had come and gone, and freedom of speech prevailed. Right, there was cancel culture even then, as Ye Kanye West has talked about. Censorship, right? We're always in a battle against it. But yeah, Lady Chatterley's Lover, Women in Love. And so I read all those books because the so-called women's look, because I knew even back then it was phony. And I see the most recent iteration. I mean, that's beginning to peter out. Sorry for using the phallic expression, petering out. But the post-feminists, anyway, would like to see Peters go away, right? You want to make us into a gender-neutral society and make us all into a biogenetic hybrid mule, right? Mule. By the way, the mule was the big enemy in the Asimov Foundation trilogy. He was the mule, and he was a mule because he had no reproductive powers. He was a eunuch. He was a hybrid. I just came across that insight recently because I was kind of revisiting the Foundation trilogy. That's Asimov, the great popularizer of science, as was some of the Huxley, as was H.G. Wells, who was part, the history, right? He was a tutor of Huxley. I think it was it at Oxford or Cambridge? Let's say, Oxbridge. He wrote popular histories as well, which I read when I was in college. And um, they were all part of the same, I'd say, I think British imperialism was starting to feel that, it wasn't going to be long before they were going to hand over the dirty work to the United States of America and just stand back and use psyops and send Peter Daszak over here, or Five Eyes people like Jordan Peterson in Canada, or Peter Dale Scott, who's Canadian, by the way, or some of these other characters, from New Zealand and Australia, to do the dirty work, right? Because these are people who think dynastically, right? And so people like H.G. Wells and his proteges like Huxley and the more current iterations. I think one of them is Neil Gaiman, by the way, who is British born. He grew up in a Scientology family, but he makes his home in America. Right? Why do you think I've been looking at skanky Santa Barbara recently? Because there's some a new power couple, an Anglo-American power couple, who's moving into the neighborhood, and they were already preceded by these people who were foundation funded, right? The Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions, right, out of Chicago. This is Rockefeller and Harvard, places like that, who have set out camp there. Well, this is part of that analysis that I've already gone through. Only the focus today is in the Southwest, which preceded that by a few decades, right? Again, Albuquerque, Taos, Santa Fe, Alamogordo, and some of the smaller towns there as well. And I promise you, by the time we finish this talk here, you're not going to be bored. We're going to go because to me, food kind of encapsulates everything, especially the hybrid dish that Americans know and love as the burrito, right? Or burrito, if you will. I'm not talking about Taco Bell. I'm talking about the real funky stuff, which has all the elements of Americana in it. We love it. And we put chili, verde or rojo, red or green sauce on it all. So we're going to end with that. We got to. And by the way, when I show that clip, it's 4 minutes long at the very end. And you're all going to get, I'm going to show at the end because I don't want to get hungry in the middle of my talk, right? You're going to see some familiar iconology in that last clip that I'm going to show you. And it's going to be none other than the Virgen de Guadalupe, right? Even in what was once northern Mexico, or what's now the Southwest America, in Santa Fe, this restaurant that serves incredible burrito, and Southwestern, it's not Mexican food, it's Southwestern. Okay, because if you go to Mexico, it's different than what you get here in America. Not better or worse, but different. I prefer Southwestern actually, but Oaxacan food is really good. It's almost all the way, there's only one state below Oaxaca, that's Chiapas, but Oaxaca has great seafood, and I had some great meals there as well. But I prefer what we call Southwest today, or some people call it Mexican food. Can't get good Mexican food, not yet, in Chicago or New York, not yet. You got to come to the Midwest. You got to come to LA. But I still think New Mexico has the best Mexican slash Southwestern but I haven't been there for a while, so maybe other parts of the country have caught up. So let me start you out here on something very simple and something very accessible to most viewers. Unfortunately, it is one of those History Channel psyops. I don't know if you remember this, but when the History Channel, this is the early days of cable, right? Now we're even moved on from cable. Who watches cable TV anymore? We cut the cable a long time. One of the early offerings was the History Channel, and it used to be called the, kind of jokingly, is the Hitler Channel, because that's all they showed us is Hitler, and that's why Nazis and Hitlers are so popular and so sexy, because that's all. So the same thing they're trying to do with psychic phenomena, hypnotism, UFO, ESP, which is today it's a continuation of what I was talking about Tuesday with the Stacey Horn book, Unbelievable, the Parapsychology Laboratory, Duke University, right? That didn't go away. In fact, I'm thinking it's submerged itself, and it's that's why there's still a lot of focus on Hal Puthoff and even Jacques Vallée, who's still giving talks. I'll show you in a minute. I think that's why it's kind of like the Annie Jacobson. Okay, it's all wrapped up here, and that was the history 50 years ago. No need to pay any attention to that. Yeah, there were some gains, there were some strides made, but it's all in the past. I think it's submerged. I think what's called psi today is more important and more valuable than ever, and it's being studied at the universities. I'm talking about the elite universities, the research universe. That's what I mean by elite. The research, they get all the big money from the Pentagon and DARPA, and probably from United Nations, and definitely from all the different military funds because we're in a military global dictatorship whose locus is in Geneva, right? Switzerland. That's why I'm interested in the Huguenot or Huguenot diaspora. Those are the bankers, right? Usually the Jews are blamed for all that, but more accurately, it's a Huguenot for that, and or Huguenot, whatever you prefer. But anyway, I'm digressing, and but it's still relevant here because they're funding it today, and I think they were funding a lot of these expeditions to the Southwest by people like D.H. Lawrence. I mean, he was a popular author in Britain and in America, but not enough to support himself. Where was his day job? Okay, he was getting money from these high wealth, mostly women. They used to be called spinsters or dowagers from England, right? These are the same people who supported Blavatsky and Theosophy. They're rich ladies, the rich European or Eastern seaboard types. And they have these lovers, these studs like Porfirio Rubirosa. We talked about Duke University. Well, that was J.B. Duke. He was the founder of the American Tobacco Company, or as we say up in Appalachia, tobacco. That was the original drug that saved the ass of the pre-United States American colonists. They got this cash crop and they were able to send it to the home country, and the rest of the story. American became a power, and they said, "Yeah, we love these drugs, tobacco. Yeah, let's go into opium. Yeah, let's do it all. Let's go into opioids." It's just a long history that we're going to have to figure out a way to break the cycle. I think it's possible, and that's why I'm doing the cultural forensic backstory here, so that we understand that. You think I'm kidding about Doris Duke was known as the poor little rich girl. She inherited daddy's wealth, and he was the one that endowed Duke University in the heart of the Tobacco Triangle, North Carolina State, Duke, and what's the third one? Another basketball power, by the way. But here she is with her stud, Ruby Rosa. He was a gigolo. By the way, he was also in the intelligence world. I think he was Dominican. He was one of those Latin lovers. Where do you think the Latin lover image comes from? He capitalized, but he was also French intelligence from what I read. Yeah, this is a popular book, but you want to check it out. Of course, he evades the real New World Order role that Ruby Rosa played in being gigolo to all these wealthy, including Zsa Zsa Gabor. And we talked about Zsa Zsa Gabor when we were, well, maybe I missed it, but she's part of that whole West Texas Nazi CIA Dulles sort of, I guess, monarch type program, Zsa Zsa and Ava, and later on, the woman who was the Playboy of the month, what's her name? Anna Nicole. Who's it? As a more contemporary reference, you might not know who Zsa Zsa Gabor is, right? So here's the take of the Hitler channel, the History Channel, about the Star Children, which the Zunis are Hopis. They didn't talk about the Blue Planet. This is a lot of stuff that's been made up, but based on Zuni cosmology, or as I refer to it, astro-cosmology, which is real, and they do have this notion that the Earth is in crisis, out of balance, and of course they were developing these totemic ideas because their whole society was being threatened by internal and external collapse. Right, that's Claude Lévi-Strauss. Remember, I mentioned him about totemism. Says that art, mythology, music, any expressive form, any creative activity, novels are an attempt by the culture trying to reconcile these different contradictions. Like in the case of Lawrence, right? He was the product of an immense prosperity. Maybe not his own family, but of the British Empire. But at what? They lost their soul. They lost their Druidic Celtic heritage, which he tried to recapture in Taos, New Mexico, which I'll get into. Wow, this is a long introduction. So let's take a little bit of a look at the Hitler channel. And the reason I'm saying this is because you're going to be seduced by it. They're going to convince you by the end of this 2 or 3 minute clip that Native Americans are dead, the Hopis are gone, the Zunis are gone, Native Americans dead. And anybody that of any sort of ethnicity, they said the Irish are dead, they've assimilated. There's a whole social science literature in the late 60s and 70s saying that, Milton Gordon, assimilation in American life, there are going to be no identifiable Jews anymore, or the Greeks, what he called the white ethnics, all the Asian people, even them, they're going to be assimilated. The blacks are always going to remain blacks. They were never really kind of allowed, but all the other groups, especially those of European, even Southern European origins, are going to be into this great melting pot, right? But it's BS, because you'll see by the end of the show here, the Zuni culture and Hopi culture is alive and well, and not just in the burritos of Santa Fe, but in their own communities, right? So don't believe it, because this is part of the demoralization psyop that we get all the time. So yeah, the space people are gonna rescue us because our old technological society is so ruinous, and it is, yeah. But who's going to offer you the solution? It's going to be the NIH. It's going to be IBM. It's going to be Google, the tech left, right? Those people. Oh, we have the solution for you. Yeah, it's really terrible. We're consuming all the resources, but we're going to take care of it. Here we go.
Currently, there are 562 Native American tribes in the United States. Many of them, like the Navajo, Hopi, and Zuni, have stories of otherworldly beings visiting Earth. Often referred to as star beings, these alien visitors are said to come down from the sky to teach mankind. And in some cases, they are even said to mate with human women, resulting in the birth of star children.
The stories of star children are quite common in Native culture. There can be quite a variety of forms of that sort of thing as well. But typically, there's a star and a human being that join together, and a child is born from that union.
They were then cared for and raised by the Indian tribes until the age of 6, when the star beings would return and retrieve the star children and leave the entire tribe staring up into the night sky, wondering what had happened to them and where they'd gone.
That's quite an interesting story in itself, to give birth to a star child and then have it taken from you. There's also the story of some star children have been left behind to become interwoven into the tribe. A lot of them later in life become elders, even at a very young age. And that's because they're believed to carry the ability or the knowledge to heal the earth.
According to the Hopi people, a tribe of more than 18,000 living on a reservation in northeastern Arizona, it is the star children who will ultimately repair what they call the Koyani Skatsi, meaning a life of corruption and turmoil, or life out of balance.
The Hopi believe the earth is out of canter. It's not balanced any longer. And it's these star children that live among the Hopi that advise even the elders on how to put the earth back into balance again.
Okay, the star children are going to, so-called star children are going to advise Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and all these other globalist front people in order to heal the planet. That's what the Hitler channel is talking about. But I'm saying that people like D.H. Lawrence, the writer who preceded Huxley, and I'll talk hopefully a little bit more at length about this in a moment. But Huxley, when he came to America, right, Huxley in Hollywood. Well, here's the artwork, Huxley in Hollywood. Let me show it to you very quick, because someone was complaining that they couldn't read the book. So here it is, jot it. You're not going to follow up on it, so to stop complaining. If you want to jot it down, go ahead, order it, read it. But en route to Los Angeles, where he was going to take Huxley, I'm talking about, take a job as a screenwriter. And by the way, this is all during the studio system, all the writers and the actors and the directors screenwriters, and they were all under contract. They worked for one studio. So when he went on the lot, all the writers, the big shot writers who we revere today, they were like, "Oh my God, it's fucking Aldous Huxley." I mean, they were in awe. So that's what he was doing, because had at least in the English speaking world, he had an incredible reputation that preceded him into Hollywood. So why would someone of that stature, who's hobnobbing with the intelligentsia, the cream of the crop of British society, as well as political leader, why would he come? Because L.A. wasn't L.A. like today. It was like really the backwater. It's like, my God, there was just nothing there. I mean, let's say in comparison to London or even an American city like New York, right? One was to gather intelligence. And I'm saying that he visited the J.B. Rhine laboratory that was made possible by the playgirl, the poor little rich girl, Doris Duke, and her rich daddy, right? J.B. Duke of Duke Energy as well. That he stopped at the Rhine lab as well with this guy named Gerald Hurd, who was also one of these British expats who migrated to Taos. And they really immersed themselves in Hopi, Zuni, Pueblo culture. I'm really generalizing here because I'm not an expert, and I'm not pretending to be. So I might be mischaracterizing the civilization. There's different, even within among specialists, there's debate on what they should be called, right? The Clovis Society, based on the shapes of the arrowheads that they found, or whatever. But I'm just using popular terminology, right? But they studied, and they said they were serious about it. But unfortunately, just like the History Channel, just like Annie Jacobson, they wanted to make it into a museum piece. They said, well, that was then, but now we collected all their art and all their jewelry, and we collected their mythologies and their legends. We're going to catalog them, just like the Grimm brothers were cataloging all the tribal lore of the Teutonic people as they were being domesticated and brought into the budding nation state, right, en route to the New World Order, right? That's where the fairy tales come in, right? And same with our lore. But the thing is, they're not fairy tales; they're epistemologies. That's what they are. It's the people who want to put them in a museum. They collect the kachina, right? The sacred kachina, these representations. They collect them. And then they put them in a museum, just like Annie Jacobson puts them in a book. Or I just pick her name because she's one of the best examples going on. I have nothing against her personally, but her and her team of writers, that's part of their function. So there's a guy named Gerald Hurd that did this. So here's D.H. Lawrence, who preceded Huxley to Taos, New Mexico, for reasons that will be shown in this little 1-minute clip. And notice I think he name checks the Celts and the Druids. And by the way, the person who's narrating this is another British writer who was also linked to intelligence. I haven't really been able to find much about it, and if you can follow that thread, you would be making a contribution instead of just repeating the same cliches about the Huxley family and eugenics and blah blah blah, and Margaret Sanger, blah blah woof woof. Anthony Burgess, right? The person who authored most prominently, I guess, Clockwork Orange, right? Later made into a movie by Stanley Kubrick, right? A society that's terrorized by these droogs, right? That's Clockwork Orange. And by the way, my original insight on Clockwork Orange is because Burgess, as a intelligence guy, just like Ian Fleming, right, who was doing this on a popular level. And by the way, Fleming did have a lot of experience in America, as you know, and also in the Caribbean. So again, another example of the literati, albeit he's doing it for the popular audience. Huxley's, his audience is like the egghead type, the educated, masses, the people, educated middle class, let's say, and professionals. But Anthony Burgess, that book, Clockwork Orange, I figured out. Oh, Clockwork. Who's famous for clockwork? Who innovating? That's the Dutch. and that's the Dutch East India Company. This is your Huguenot diaspora. Again, a lot of them were welcomed into Holland for the craftsmanship. They were Swiss watch, Dutch clockwork. So that's the clockwork. And the orange is what? The House of Orange, which is also Princeton University Orange, right? So that's what he meant by that. I figured that one out because I'm a man of letters myself. I think I can think on that dimensional plane. That's why I was able to figure out that Aldous Huxley was not just putzing around. He was not just slumming in America. And J.B. Rhine, it was not just pursuing at Duke University, was just pursuing some sort of dead end on what we now call ESP. And of course, it's all been trivialized, of course. And as I told you before, don't pay attention to that stuff. That's a psyop, because all that research there is foundational for what's going on in 2022, which we know nothing about. We've been studiously kept away from it with all the different conferences on, it's kind of like a Project Bluebeam for all the fanboys and fangirls. I've been to these, right? It's very cult-like, and it's all based on personalities, and it's fascinating. It's entertaining. I learn a lot. I enjoy going. Don't get me wrong. But that doesn't mean it's on target, right? And I'm not making any special claims of having some inside knowledge. I'm just adept at this, and I happen to be a writer as well. I mean, I wanted to write. I wanted to write like D.H. Lawrence. I mean, okay. Here's Anthony Burgess, the novelist, piano player, critic, icon, who's narrating the life of D.H. Lawrence, who was alienated from his highly industrialized British society, and he needed to get to Taos, New Mexico, with his wife Frida, who, by the way, was German and was suspected of disloyalty, just like the British royal family, right? They changed their name, right? They became the House of Windsor, right? Around World War II. You know the story, so D.H. Lawrence got kind of caught, like, anti-German, anti-Kaiser sentiment. Some of it hit in the United States as well. So here it is.
Trapped in wartime Cornwall, the only solace Lawrence could find in a militarized England full of jackals and hyenas was in a vision of the ancient Celtic past, in which, as he might have put it, altars were raised not in the desiccated brain, but in the living loins.
Cornwall is a country that makes a man psychic. The longer he stayed, the more intensely it had that effect on him. It was as if he were developing second sight and second hearing. He would go out and call softly for the spirits, the presences he felt coming down from the moors in the night. Tuatha de Danann, he would call softly. Tuatha de Danann, be with me. And it was as if he felt them come.
The war was over, but the jackals were still there. Lawrence requested permission to leave the country, his right as a free man, but the bureaucratic jackals were very slow in granting him a passport. England didn't want him, but England seemed very reluctant to let him go. As for Lawrence, he'd made up his mind to leave England for good and start what he called his savage pilgrimage. He was looking for a country dimly prefigured in the woods and fields of the Nottinghamshire of his boyhood, and described in the somewhat brutal but honest male life of the miners. He was looking for a country whose nature he only imperfectly saw himself, in which magic ruled rather than reason, in which there was sexual harmony and total free play for the instincts. A country in which was practiced what Lawrence called a kind of phallic worship. No such country has ever really existed except in Lawrence's imagination. Nevertheless, he was determined to find it, and so he set off. England was finished, and he was finished with England.
So this is in the 20s. Guess which country Burgess is alluding to? Yeah, it's America. And he went to Taos, New Mexico, to recharge his loins. He was also suffering from tuberculosis. He was having a physical, maybe it was from growing up in the Midlands, inhaling all that coal smoke. Who knows, right? They called it Black Country because of the blackness of the pollution at the time. So he, for health reasons, also he had this fantasy about what America was, this sort of pristine tribal society that had been driven or suppressed or driven underground, as it turns out, in the British Isles, the Celtic, the Druidic, which never went away, and it's still very much with us today. Later revived, by the way, by the counterculture, and that's why D.H. Lawrence and Huxley were so popular amongst the Anglo-American counterculture set, because they were exploring these alternatives to the post-industrial world, which is noxious, right? And we're in the bio-industrial world right now. We've entered into the brave new world of biopolitics, right? Which some of our better writers have been talking about. Anyway, before I run out of time, I want to show you some of the material that was contemporaneous with people like Huxley, and why he wanted to go to the Southwest and visit J.B. Rhine and get in touch with the Hopi culture. This is the type of newsreels he would have seen back, and this came from 1932. It's from Pathé. Sounds like a French company, but it was based in London. They got these they used to play newsreels in movie houses. Okay, you can just get an idea that it was that these images and that's anthropological film, by the way. There's no accident. The American Indian is the most. I mean, the different tribe, the hundreds of different tribes are the most collectively the most studied and examined group of people in the world, right? Because of their importance to not just taking their research. We know about the land and the genocide and the buffalo. I'm not trivializing that. I'm not discounting it. But what I'm trying to get across here is that they were also harvesting psychic energies and powers and epistemologies and cosmology, astro-cosmologies from these groups, anthropologically and also from a literary perspective. And that's not really talked about in books like this, or even, Stacey Horn. She missed the plot line. She missed the underlying hidden agenda, why these institutions were set up. And that's no knock on them. That's just, we all have our limitations, right? We're all looking at from our angle of vision, which by definition is going to be limited. And that's why the discussion goes on. There's no end to this type of work, research, and thought. Okay, so let's move on to J.B. Rhine, because I have given him short shrift. I've alluded to him on and on with this book here, Unbelievable, which has some good elements and it has some bad. But let's take a look at well, just to show you very briefly the persistence of the D.H. Lawrence reputation today. Just don't take it from my word. There's these conferences that are held in Taos dedicated to D.H. Lawrence. Let's take a quick look. You can see a lot of counterculture in 50s and 60s and even into the 90s. People understood the importance of Taos and New Mexico and the Southwest in general as being a very powerful spiritual center, intellectual center. You can find this on YouTube. This goes into all the different rich ladies who funded this stuff. These are the globalist people, and they're the ones who dominate the art scene. They're the ones who's they have their daughters who are literary agents, and they're in the media. They make movies, and they exclude people like me who actually know something, and they put their daughters in these journalism, quote unquote journalism slots and professorships in areas like that. That's how power replicates itself. It's same with Huxley, right? He was the beneficiary of that. So here's the Rhine lab. Let's take a quick look at it. Done from a kind of a dingy. She could have attended UC Santa Barbara. That they all have the same affect. You notice that the same speech pattern. She's in Durham, North Carolina, right? But she talks like someone who goes to UC Santa Barbara, like someone from LA, a Valley girl. But anyway, I'm not ranking on her. I just thought it's curious. But she's introducing she even misidentified. This is the laboratory funded by the Duke fortune, right, of J.B. Rhine, who was admired by Huxley and many, many others.
Are you considering enrolling in Intro to Psychology this semester? Well, if you go back about 50 or 75 years, you could be adding a different type of psychology course to your ACES book bag. Think ESP, telepathy, and precognition.
I think it was around 1927 that William McDougall, who was a very famous psychologist, who was the chairman of the psychology department at that time, brought Dr. Rhine and his wife Louisa to Duke to set up a parapsychology laboratory within the psychology department.
This is our museum of the equipment that was used in parapsychology in the early days when the center was formed. Over here, this is one of the screens that was used with the ESP cards that were originally used for testing telepathy and precognition. And you can see, you might recognize some of these cards. They were used in Ghostbusters and some other popular movies and some other places. But they were actually invented at Duke University back in the 1920s. And they were used for testing in the Duke Parapsychology Lab back in the 20s.
Despite Duke's history as a hub for parapsychology research, the university is no longer affiliated with the Rhine Research Center.
When Dr. Rhine retired.
Yeah, you know why? They made it, like I said, they made it into a museum, and the real research is going on at these ultra elite laboratories. And by the way, it's flying under the radar because everybody's looking at Dr. Lieber, at Yale and all these, Malone and all that. That's where the focus is. But the real action that's old news, right? And that's let the Children's Health Defense Fund deal with that. But that's and it's important. I don't mean to minimize it, but the real action is going on right here, and we don't even know anything of. At least I don't. Maybe you do. And I'm pointing it out so that people will be sensitized to it, so that you see some leakage there, you'll be able to follow up on it. And again, I don't minimize all the nanotechnology, mRNA, and all the other stuff that's meant to create this techno utopia for us, which is really a cage, right? A bio prison. So here's another example of the museum piece. The native people are gone. We can admire their handiworks, and they're on a reservation, and we name streets after them in communities like Los Alamitos, Alamogordo. By the way, Los Alamos means poplar, and poplar, I checked it out, supernatural. It's associated with the duality of good and evil, and also it could be like a portal to hell, right? And this goes back to their naming conventions. Whoever came up with the species and genus, we know it as poplar. That's Los Alamos, and then there's Alamogordo, the town in New Mexico, which has all the PhDs, that's the most PhDs per capita. By the way, New Mexico as a state has the most number of PhD people with advanced degrees in all the nation per capita, right? It's because that's where all the RD is going on. It's not just nuclear energy, but it's interdimensional portals, and it's also psi that's going on right now, right? So this report's not talking about 1920s D.H. Lawrence, Aldous Huxley. So let's break out of that little mold there and move into the present, because that's where the action is. That's our world. So here's his buddy Gerald Hurd, who went to go visit the Rhine lab, which it's now a museum, right? A museum piece. But Hurd went with. He was 5 years older than Huxley. And he was tight with the BBC. The BBC was founded and run by a bunch of pedophiles. You go to BBC, the old headquarters, the building, there's sculpture by a bunch of man-boy love, Jimmy Savile type people who all went to school and bugger each other up at Oxbridge, right? That's their milieu. That's how they roll. So this is Hurd, and he created a museum, became a philanthropist.
Here we are at the 15th annual, I believe it's the 15th annual Kachina Carvers here at the Hurd Museum, and the crowds just get smaller and smaller, and the artists just get fewer and fewer each year.
So they go into some of the native people. I'm running out of time, but you hear it. The crowds get smaller. The Indians are disappearing, just like John the Savage. Remember in Brave New World? There was a character, John. He was British, but he had spent his first 20 years living on a reservation, and he didn't like the emerging world order, right? World government. He rejected that, and he's known in the book called John. But like everything else that these globalists use on us for psyop to demoralize us, right? It's all British. It's American. It's not just monitoring on your cell phone, but it's to make you feel like shit. Like you're disgusting. You're not going to reproduce. You're going to die, and you're ugly, and you're obese. Alamo Gordo means fat cedar. By the way, Gordo means fat, and these names are not, and these sites are not selected capriciously or randomly. So the demise of the Zuni, the Hopi people, Native people, and whatever group you belong to has been, as Mark Twain, to paraphrase, has been vastly overhyped. That's what they want to see. Whether it's going to happen or not, that's up for you and me to decide, right? Our future hangs in the balance. But I like our odds because they meaning the other side, the globalists, the technocrats, they're one side, they're opposite. That's why they wanted to study the native people, because they have a fuller, more complete, they have a cosmology that was successfully vanquished in the British Isles, although there are still druidic elements there, which, by the way, Tolkien was very much, he held a chair in Old English. So, it's never gone away. So here's native people in recent times who are celebrating their society, their cosmology, their existence against generations now of incorporation or assimilation. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the parapsychology. I'm going to miss that. The heading on this is the buffalo dance, and this is Zuni in the same region where people like D.H. Lawrence and all the East Coast American intelligentsia artists and the British artists and other nationalities came in to try to get into the headspace and the cosmology of the Aboriginal people. So they're still rocking it here. This is like done in 2010. Now, those figures have been represented as dolls. quote unquote dolls, kachina. But that's all part of the cosmology and response to the crisis of their society. But they weren't vanquished. They're still they're still celebrating them. That's not a one-off. Look on YouTube. As much as I complain about TubeView, there's a lot of good material. There's tons of material of these groups that are not sponsored by the government. Just the tribe puts, from what I can tell, together. They don't need some sort of permission, some sort of license, some sort of permit from the government. Probably it's done on native lands, and you know how I've been exploring native sovereignty, the Indian casinos, and how that articulates with the biosecurity state that's being imposed here. So here's another example very quickly before I end with the Great American New Mexico, more specifically Santa Fe contribution to American and hopefully world cuisine. That's the breakfast burrito. But before that, let's check out another one of these celebrations and regenerative community gatherings. Well, you can see that even the chillins are dancing, right? So Gerald Hurd and all you exterminationists, you haters of humanity, your plans were foiled in this example. John the Savage did not disappear. John the Savage will never disappear, right? I'm not just talking about Indians. There's savage in every single race and ethnicity here. And what savage? I mean, these are the natural people who understand God and the spirit and the soul, who haven't given themselves over to the biotechnocratic state, which is supposed to solve all our problems. All we need is an electrical vehicle. All we need is satellites, right? So we can, this Elon Musk oil, right? That's him. I'm sorry if I'm offending you, because a lot of you've been fooled by Elon Musk, but I'll forget my apology. I'm glad you're offended. So anyway, I promised you this guy here who has his own show on TubeView. Okay. So, okay. You can cancel me every once in a while, TubeView, but I love you. I don't love you. I love the people on it, because this guy's breaking it down. What the Santa Fe reality, it's colonial, it's native, it's people from Europe. It's even the Chinitos, because this guy's half Japanese, I think. He kind of lets the cat out of the bag. He's not straight up Chicano or native or Santa Fean. I think his mother's from Japan originally. So here we go. Check it out. And look for the Virgin of Guadalupe on the wall there, okay? As I tipped you off.
What up? What's up, Cliff? How are you, man? Welcome. Welcome to my hometown. So I got a pork tamale for you and a beef fajita, and we're gonna set you up in Santa Fe, man. If you look around, you got natives selling jewelry, the flags of the Spanish conquistadors, and what this culture is also represented in the food of this area. I mean, this is one of the only places where your main ingredient is also the main decoration. You got chilies everywhere. And to give you a little bit of context, that building right there is called the Palace of the Governors, and this is the plaza. This was all established as a capital city like 400 years ago.
Isn't this country like not even 300 years old?
Yeah, this country's like 240 some years old. This reaches far beyond the history of the United States. There's a duality in Santa Fe. We are in the desert, but we're also at 7,000 feet. You go out to Canyon Road, you got 200 art galleries. There's more artists per capita than any other city. It's a community that is based on food and creative culture. I'm taking you to Palacio Cafe, where my man Damien has been slugging it out at the best chili spot in town. And after 20 years there, he's opened up his own spot. I want to start you on the breakfast burrito, which was invented here in Santa Fe. This is my secret spot. Hey, Damien, how are you, man?
Good, nice to see you.
Good to see you too. Good to
Thank
see
you for coming.
This is my friend Sheldon.
Hey, chef.
Nice
to
to
meet
meet
you.
you. Thank you for
Hey,
coming.
Hello.
Maria.
You used to work down the street at the Shed.
Yes.
And the Shed was like famous for their chili and stuff like that, but now it's like you're on your own spot.
This chill is better now.
Ah, I put it out there. What signifies Santa Fe New Mexican cuisine?
There's like two truths in New Mexican cooking. One, you can put chili on everything, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and two, everything goes in a tortilla. The biggest misconception, especially in northern New Mexico, is that it's Mexican. It's its own thing. It has Mexican roots, but it also is heavily influenced by the Native American culture, a little bit of Tex-Mex thrown in, the original Spanish conquistadors that came through here. So we have chicken enchiladas. I got huevos rancheros, which is just like corn tortillas, a little bit of chili and eggs. The breakfast burrito, potatoes, bacon, eggs, cheese, and just smothered. This red chili, he stews for like 6 hours. My show, I like to like overcomplicate things a little bit, but like
A little bit?
a little, yeah, well, a lot. I overcomplicate things a lot. What people do with breakfast burritos is they'll add a ton of stuff and then it becomes a sandwich, it becomes a wrap.
Right.
No, a breakfast burrito is just like, get that filling in there as simple as possible and then
Choose your
smother
sauce,
it.
smother it.
Straight to the point.
Forget that avocado. No, you don't need
You don't
all
need the avocado, you don't need
those-
all the other stuff. Like, this is all you need. The chili here is like a religion. The state question in New Mexico is red or green. And that refers to, do you want green chili or red chili? But if you want both, you just say Christmas. So the red and the green, you taste the difference, right? It's the same chili. It's classified under Hatch, which is actually a town. It's just at different stages. So like the green is when it's younger. So you basically take the green and you put it in the big canisters and you roast it over open fire. In the fall, you drive around and you roll your windows down.
Oh, shoot.
And there's a smell that permeates throughout the city. You know it's the season. Then you peel off the outside and then you stew it very simply. Maybe salt, a little onion powder, sometimes cumin. And the red, you take the red and you dry it out. And you'll see like these things called ristras hanging. And they're beautiful decorations, but it's also food. Either rehydrate it or grind it into a powder. That's the basis for the red chili here. And so anything under it, keep it as simple as possible and let that chili shine.
Well, you're probably getting hungry as I am, but the point is that yeah, we know about J.B. Duke and his monopolization of tobacco, right? The early colonists, and of course he rationalized it and addicted to many young American men, especially in World War II, to tobacco, nicotine addiction. But also remember, even before tobacco, it was spices, the Spice Islands. This is why the Dutch masters were going to Indonesia and all those other places, because these were precious commodities like the chilies, the chili pepper, right? All of it, cinnamon, right? All of it. Okay, I hope that we have breaking new ground here, that we're going to move beyond the cliches and about the reading list that we just keep repeating over and over again, and start thinking about Huxley and all these other people who came to America and studied Psi, ESP, and all these people as being inspired by the indigenous epistemologies, cosmologies. And this is why they've been studying it so intensely from the beginnings of anthropological science, even before then, I would say, and they're still doing it, right? They think they've the bosses, the big bosses, right? The people behind Anthony Fauci. They think they've conquered us biogenetically or through biotyranny, but they know that they have not conquered us as spiritual beings, right? As creations of God, right? The earth, and they're working on it. So I'm going to keep pursuing this thread here. It was a big leap forward for me, so far as my understanding of the contemporary operations there, and I hope you'll clue into it instead of just staying in your own prejudice world or being a fanboy of author A, B, or C. And I'm not denigrating what they're doing, but I'm saying my whole reason for being here is to come up with original insights and to blaze new trails that we can tread so that we can expand, not just for the sake of expanding knowledge, but for our own self-protection and advancement. Just like the Zuni, the Hopi people, right? They turn to the past in order to understand the future and move the present and to move into the future as a human community. So that's my agenda. Have yourself a snack. I'm going to cook myself some food. I did have a breakfast burrito, but that was yesterday. So I'm going to eat something a little bit more light today. Have a good weekend. We'll see you, God willing, on Tuesday, hopefully with some more breakthroughs here. Thank you very much for your indulgence. See you soon. Enjoy life, because the New World Order, the deep state handlers, the NIH, the Pentagon, DARPA, Washington, D.C., they hate that. So have yourself a burrito. Make it yourself, too. I think I'm going to cook myself some beans and wrap it up with some organic corn tortilla. All right, bye.